Good afternoon. This is Dave Larson, Superintendent. I'd like to welcome all the guests zooming in today. Usually we would be at Marquardt together in person, enjoying a delicious lunch, networking, connecting, sharing stories, and but we're doing the best we can, zooming in and connecting. And so just want to thank all our family providers and teenage providers who really work in partnership with Glenbard as you connect and serve the greater community and our families in Glenbard community. And again, we always really appreciate this luncheon and give you a chance to network and really honor you for your service to our students and families. Want to thank Gilda and GPS for really pivoting and being nimble this year and identifying outstanding speakers in the context of this pandemic as we are going through an uncharted, unique, and sort of scary journey as we try and do our work professionally, but also personally, individually, collectively, and as families, especially raising our kids, trying to figure it out because it's such a uncharted journey. And so we need all the help we can get. And really wanted to highlight today's topic with Dr. Duffy. Wow, anxiety. I'm going to be honest. I have 3 older kids and they're all in their 20s. They're not teenagers. But we've had conversations about anxiety this year more than all the other years I can remember. All of us struggle and contend with just the challenges, the normal challenges, but the pandemic on top of this has really caused us to have a lot of fierce conversations as we personally navigate through those challenges. So let me just highlight Dr. Duffy's accomplishments, and then I'll turn it over to Gilda, and she can highlight some upcoming events. Dr. Duffy is a highly sought after clinical psychologist, best-selling author, parenting and relationship expert, and proud husband and father. He has been working with individuals, couples, teens, and families for nearly 20 years. Along with his clinical work, Dr. Duffy is the author of the #1 best-selling books, The Available Parent and Parenting, and The Teen in the Age of Anxiety. He is a frequent media presence, appearing regularly on national television, radio outlets, and cited in national print and online publications. Dr. Duffy is a nationally recognized expert in self-awareness, relationships, and parenting. He speaks extensively in both public and corporate forums, and we're delighted to welcome here today to the Glenbard Parents Series. Welcome, Dr. Duffy. Let me turn it over to Gilda.
Thank you, Dr. Larson. Thank you to all of you that are here today. If this is your first time to the Glenbard Parents Series, a special welcome to you. If you had seen our brochure, it says clearly on the back, we welcome all public, private, parochial, homeschooling parents, caregivers, students, and school staff. And I can't emphasize that enough. So as you know, Dr. Duffy is back tonight at 7 p.m. We're going to hear a lot about social media, but in this case, we're asking you to use that social media and spread the word. We want as many people listening tonight as possible, and always to all the GPS events, which are always free and never any registration. This is a special event. We're grateful to our sponsors. You just saw the sponsor slide. An additional sponsor for these special events today is Northwestern Medicine Behavioral Health. And just very quickly, upcoming, there it is again. Tonight's program is being live streamed by the College of DuPage. Thank you, one of our sponsors. A couple of upcoming programs, The Price You Pay for College with Ron Lieber, a talk about stress, an entirely new roadmap for the biggest financial decision your family will ever make. Dr. Larson and I were just discussing, we're very excited about hosting Tara Westover, the author of the book Educated, on the 23rd. And there's even a program smack dab in the middle of that, Sean Derrick, who'll be talking to students during the day and speaking to parents at night about how to connect with your child. So go to glenbardgps.org. You'll see some slides, some notes, and often recordings. And this gives me a chance to thank Dr. Duffy for allowing us to record this session, and it will be available afterwards. All of the slides, all of the videos are always on the page of the past speaker. You can find it there. Love this book. Let's listen to Dr. Duffy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gildan. Thank you, Dr. Larson, and the entire Glenbard Parent Series group. As Dr. Larson points out, this is not an easy kind of thing to pivot and put together. I know we would all prefer to be in person in the same room and to make something happen that feels intimate and works. I think we all owe them a little bit of a golf clap in your office or your home or wherever you are, because as seamless as this feels, this takes a lot of work to put together, and it is, I can tell, a work of passion for the people involved here, and they've worked really, really hard behind the scenes to get us to this moment. So kudos and thank you so much for having me. Just a note on looking at what comes up in the Glenbard Parent Series. There is not a book I haven't read in coming up, and I'm going to be attending many of these events. Attend these things. These are brilliant, brilliant authors, and you will gain enormous wisdom from talking and listening to some of these people. Yes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now. I'm really grateful that a lot of you have taken some time in the middle of your very busy day to spend some time with me. My wife, Julie, would tell you that I spend way too much time in my office doing clinical work with teens, tweens, young adults, and families. And that's something she and I are going to work on. But in the meantime, I'm lucky enough to have some insight into what's going on in the minds of kids, what we're doing that might be helping them along the path toward easing their anxiety, and what we might unwittingly be doing to hinder that process. So we're going to talk about both sides of that equation today. Let's start a year ago. About a year ago now, I was on a book tour for what Dr. Larson was talking about, this jumbo book behind me, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. And I thought I had both of those concepts absolutely pinned down, new teen and age of anxiety, and that was going to be static and wasn't going to change. 2020 changed that a little bit. We'll get to that. But what I was talking about then were all of the things that had changed since I wrote my first book called The Available Parent a decade ago. All the things that most of us as parents, as teachers, as staff, we didn't know that much about. We, just a few years ago, we didn't know what vaping was. We didn't know what juuling was. We didn't necessarily know that social media was going to play such a prominent role in the self-worth and the self-esteem of kids. We didn't know that kids were going to become so keenly aware of all the emotional disorders, from depression to anxiety to attention issues to you name it, that could afflict them, and that they might have ready access to some of the medications affiliated with those disorders. And those disorders would be sticky for them. They would identify with them. They would become part of who they are, sometimes in a very unhealthy way. I definitely didn't know 4, 5, 10 years ago that we were going to see an uptick, massive uptick in academic and social pressures that our kids were going to run into. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that our kids were going to become more suicidal. This is what was going to become part of the normal vernacular that they were talking about. That school shootings were going to become part of the vernacular, that a pandemic was going to become part of the vernacular. And what one child brilliantly called identity traffic, which is definitely new. And she told me, Dr. Duffy, I have all these identities that I have to keep track of. I have to keep track of my identity at home, with my siblings, with my parents, at school, with my friends, with my teachers, with my coaches, with my dean, at my job, if I have a job, online, and with myself. And all these are slightly different identities. It's like spinning all these plates in the air all at the same time while trying to lead a normal teenage life. It is a set of anxiety-riddled factors that are new by and large in the last several years. And a year ago, I was also talking about the change in my practice. I'm seeing more young people than I ever have by a lot. And I've always worked a lot. I've worked a lot of clinical hours. And when you do this kind of work, you expect to see some crisis calls. Every once in a while, you're going to get a call in the morning. Oh, this urgent thing has come up overnight. He or she is overly emotional, won't go to school. I think we might have found weed in the car, whatever it is. We're throwing a fit. And in a given month, if we were talking 4 or 5 years ago, I would tell you, yeah, I run into that. Um, Maybe once or twice a month, 3 times on a really rough month. Now I get 4 or 5 of those calls a day. I was telling the group I spoke to this morning that I had 6 of them. I now have 7, by the way, that I will need to get back to at some point, either today or this evening, but urgent issues that families are dealing with. So that huge differential between just a few years ago and now tells me that something really dramatic has changed. And I really am able to encapsulate that in the sphere of anxiety these days. And remember, I'm talking about what I was talking about a year ago, January 2020. This is before we had a pandemic. So if I was worried about our kids and our staff, then imagine the degree to which I'm worried about them and you today. It is dramatically different, right? We all know this. Um, so before we really get into it this afternoon, I will give you a mild warning that some of the things I'm going to say, they're going to be familiar to you, but they're not going to be altogether pleasant to hear. But I think we have an hour, and let's use the hour because I have some thoughts, tips, ideas on the back end, and I want to hear from you as well. If you have any ideas as well about what we might do to help mitigate this anxiety in our kids that we work with and we're crazy about, and for ourselves as well. Um, so I want to start by telling you a couple of stories about some kids I work with. I will spare you their identifying information because confidentiality is important. But I'm going to start by talking about a young man we're going to call Tim. Tim is clearly not his real name, but Tim is 18 years old. I started working with Tim about 2 years ago. And his presenting complaints, although he was and still is charismatic and smart, good looking, athletic, kind of this whole package of kids where you feel like, I can't imagine much is going wrong in the life of this guy. And yet, here are some of Tim's presenting complaints to me. He was unsure whether he was ever going to be able to have a successful future. This plagued Tim. He thought about it all the time. He had a GPA of 3.3 or 3.4. He had an ACT score of 29. He wasn't sure he was going to get into any college anywhere. And this was on his mind all the time. He wasn't sure that he was going to be able to afford himself and a family the life he is living now. And I think oftentimes when I hear guys like Tim talking or girls in this sphere talking, that I don't remember thinking this way when I was a teenager. You probably do not remember thinking this way when we were teenagers, but we all know that things are different these days because our kids have access to all of the stuff, everything that we need to know on the whole world, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, true, false, it doesn't matter. It's in here somewhere and they have ready access to it, right? And that's a great thing in some ways and a really wretched thing in other ways. And it's on us, as the people who are consulting them to help them figure out the difference. But this stuff can be really, really harrowing for kids. And they hear a lot from their friends as well. And that makes them nervous for the future. Tim didn't feel that people cared for him. He felt like a burden to the people who loved him, who he loved, including and especially his parents. And he felt like he was missing out a lot. He had this social anxiety that was pretty pervasive. So sometimes he would go out, sometimes he wouldn't. But when he didn't, he would look at Snapchat and Instagram and have this kind of ready evidence right in his hand that said, you're missing out on a good time. You are no longer a popular guy. All sorts of things, all these negative messages that he's giving himself. this is where it gets a little dicey. Tim watches porn every single day of his life. And for those of you who work with teenagers, especially teenage boys and tweenage boys, this is not only not abnormal, it is more and more the norm. And it started fairly innocuously. He described that, one day he stumbled upon a website called Pornhub, and being a precocious, curious teenager with a libido, he followed through, he watched, and now he watches every single day. And he has devolved into looking at the dark web, at some things that we would never want ourselves or our children to ever look at. Yet Tim looks at this stuff daily, and it has a dramatic impact on his life because he feels like he's unsure about his sexuality because he is no longer aroused by this material in the way that he was when he started watching it. So he's very, very concerned about that. He also wonders whether he will ever have a normal sex life, or be able to maintain a normal relationship. And this is huge. This is a really big worry for him. So partly as a result, Tim smokes weed every single day. And I think everybody listening to me right now probably knows a boy, a girl, both, who smoke weed every single day. Tim gets up and he smokes because he doesn't think he can cope with the day. He will leave, he'll turn his camera off and smoke during e-learning. He will leave a class in school and smoke, just hit a vape pen or take a bite of a little nibble of an edible, because he does not believe he is competent and resilient to make it through the day. He really doesn't. He smokes to sleep, and most of his friends do the same. And so they're just kind of like smoking their time away. And he will be very clear, and a lot of kids will, that he is not smoking to get high. He is smoking just to get by, just to manage, get through his days and his nights. So I think he's a perfectly resilient young man, but he has no idea of this. And finally, and probably most urgently, Tim doesn't value his life. He doesn't feel like he's made much of a contribution. When I think back to my 16, 17, 18 years old self, I don't think I cared whether I was making a contribution to the world. But this is on kids' minds now because of all this access that they have, right? Because they have this kind of global view on things that we might not have had when we were younger. So we have to learn from them what their points of view really are like. So he is not actively suicidal. He's very clear. I'm not going to do anything, Dr. Duffy, but if when I walked out of the building today, I was hit by a truck or a bus, or if I didn't wake up tomorrow morning, that'd be fine with me. I don't really care. And maybe everybody else would be better off without me too. And this is something I hear, and you may hear, from an awful lot of kids more and more and more with each passing year. And honestly, these days, with each passing month, I hear this idea of passive suicidality. Tim also doesn't believe the world is a very good place and that people are very good, which also compounds the problem enormously, as you might guess. Now, Tim told his parents initially, hey, I want to go to therapy. I'm really worried about my grades. As you might guess, like most kids, the grades were the last thing on Tim's mind. This was his way into the room. And as a side note, I don't remember the last time that the presenting issue as it was brought to me by a parent matched the issue that was on the mind of the child. It might have been symptomatic of it. In other words, he really might be unmotivated, not doing his work, using a substance, playing too many video games, whatever it might be, some negative behavior, but that behavior informs and is symptomatic of a deeper underlying emotional issue, typically some form of anxiety or depression. So that's important to know. Also, just as a side note, but I think, and I'm reinforcing, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so forgive me that, but I'll reinforce some things you already know. If you ever have a child before you who asks to see a therapist, please get that child in to see a therapist. Let's believe them. And, the downside would be that we waste an hour of somebody's time. The upside is we might be saving a life, or saving some self-esteem or saving a career. There's an awful lot of upside to having children see therapists. And we're in this interesting period where I think the taboo around therapy among young people in particular is lifting rather quickly. And my strong bias is that we take quick advantage of that. All right, cool. Normally at this point, by the way, I would ask the very full auditorium full of you guys, hey, are we doing okay? Are we all on the same page? Now I'm just going to go on the assumption like, we're good. We're good. Let's keep going. All right, good. Glad to hear, guys. All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so this is all the reason that I wrote this latest book. I wrote a book about 10 years ago, I thought was my last word on parenting. But with all this new stuff coming up, I wrote this latest book because so much of what our kids are going through and what's on their minds takes place in the shadows where we are fully unaware, right? Up in their rooms, sitting in the classroom with the AirPods on and the hood up, looking at one screen or another. So there's so much going on in their lives that we are unaware of. They're not talking about, they're not sharing, but they are consumed by. And the more we are able to open up dialogue with them, and I'll get to that, the better we are able to put our voice in the mix and help them in any way through the things that plague them. And an awful lot of things plague our kids. Now, Tim's story might seem alarming, and you may think, well, I get it. Duffy cherry picked the hardest, roughest case he's working on in order to make a point. But the truth of the matter is, and I think you guys know this, I work with a lot of Tims. Maybe not point by point by point, but I don't know of a single child that I work with that doesn't have some of these issues on his or her mind on any given day. And you probably don't either. So I want us to just keep in mind that these things are on the minds of kids. Somebody asked me recently, your book, when you talk about the age of anxiety, you're talking about diagnosable anxiety, right? You know, I don't have to worry about my kid because he or she doesn't have panic attacks or school phobia or social phobia. And so if there's not that generalized anxiety disorder kind of thing, I probably don't have to buy it or worry about it. No, that's not really true. What I'm really talking about is this heightened anxiety that all our kids are engulfed in right now during these days, unaware of because they're not used to a life without it. But with screens in their hands and a pandemic going on and all these academic pressures and social pressures and medical pressures and all this other stuff, there's an awful lot on their minds. So this is about what's on their emotional plates on any given day, what they're carrying around in their minds that we might be wholly unaware of. And this stuff starts early now, you guys, because our 7, 8, 9-year-olds know things that we might not have known when we were 14, 15, or 16. The talks that our parents had when we were teenagers, or like the Duffys, never, we now have to initiate with our kids at younger and younger and younger ages. And if parents are reluctant to do it, I think staff sometimes has to step in and make that move, which is hard, but it's really, really important that kids get these talks and have these ears open to them and available to them. I want you to know that Tim's story is pre-COVID. It has nothing to do at all with the pandemic. All of those issues that he's struggling with, he was struggling with a year ago. They've amplified in the wake of the pandemic, but they're not about the pandemic. So I'm going to talk to you about somebody I met during the pandemic and a little bit about what's on her mind so that we kind of compile these two stories and think about what we do now. So there's a girl I work with. We're going to call her Shannon. Shannon is 16 years old. Shannon, I met around April, maybe early May of last year. So we're in the quarantine period of the pandemic. And along with some of the things that are on Tim's mind, some of the things that are on Shannon's mind run like this. She misses her friends a lot. as so many of the kids you're working with do, right? And she describes to me that on the rare occasion when she gets together with them, she feels this sense of social anxiety that she has never felt before, where she's kind of like, I'm not sure where to stand, what to do with my hands, what to say. She feels like she's missing the practice effect of being social with people, and it concerns her a great deal. Shannon also does not believe us, we adults, when we say, you know what, the pandemic is temporary and one day this will be over. And in support of that assertion, she would say, back in March of last year, you told me this was going to last 2 weeks and then the rest of the semester. And then by the time the summer's over, we'll be back in school. And then the next semester. So why do I believe that anything's going to be different in the future? She doesn't think anything's going to be normal again, ever. She thinks she's going to be wearing a mask and getting shots 10 years from now and still have some susceptibility, and everybody around her will too. So that's a worry. Her parents are super cautious, and so she's not allowed to get together like some of her friends are. And so she feels them moving away from her, moving on without her. And she will show me via a Zoom call. She will hold her phone up to the screen and say, see, this is them having fun. And she'll show me a Snapchat story. And she's not altogether wrong, that people are moving on and everyone has different metrics about what's safe and okay and what's not. And she's on the more conservative end of that. So that's really, really difficult for a lot of kids on both sides of the spectrum. She goes out on occasion. She goes to school on a split schedule. But she says it all feels odd and removed and robotic and kind of devoid of emotion. So it feels strange to her. She doesn't enjoy going to school. She feels like robotic and kind of like she could get in trouble at any time if she just does something that feels normal to her, like say hello to a friend in the hallway, which did happen recently. So she's not sure when things are going to feel less alien, and that occupies her mind. Shannon happens to have asthma, and so she's one of these kids who is actually deeply concerned about whether she is going to contract this virus and what impact it's going to have on her well-being, physically. She has a grandmother who lives with her and living grandparents, and she's concerned about their well-being and whether she is going to be the asymptomatic character or person that makes them sick. She's worried sick about that. She described something recently that I hadn't thought about, but I thought was really interesting. She says she's desperately lonely. That's not the interesting part. And she says, what I miss most, to my surprise, is I'm used to going to school and hugging people. I hug my girlfriends. I hug the guys I like and who are in my class who I'm close to. I hug 20 people a morning, and then I hug people goodbye at the end of the day. And I haven't touched people in so long. And think about how important a part of adolescence that is. Something that may seem ordinary and maybe something that doesn't matter that much, but to hear a teenager talk about it, it's these little things. We think about like missing prom and missing, finals and missing, these big passages, missing graduation. The kids are thinking like, I just miss being with my friends, moment to moment, day to day, the in-jokes and the crushes and all this stuff that we're just not able to do in the same way, at least, that we used to do them. And this is what's on their minds all the time, right? And the substitute, they're pretty thin. They're not great, and they're aware of that because they've experienced a world without it. She worries about political disagreements with her boyfriend, separating them, breaking them up, and they have dramatic political disagreements. She worries that the civil unrest that we're going through right now, including what happened at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago, is going to become much, much worse and eventually devolve into civil war. And she looks at subreddit pages and something I hadn't heard about until a couple of weeks ago, TikTok news, and some other material on the dark web to support that assertion. And we know how we operate in these forums, right? We tend to look for a confirmation bias. We're not looking for the good news. We're looking for the stuff that supports what we already believe And that, in a case like Shannon's, is a really dangerous place to be. Adult guidance and adult supervision in this regard is critically important. And we'll talk about how we get a Shannon to listen to us in a little bit here. Good. Overall, Shannon feels this sense of desperation and depression and anxiety she never ever thought she would feel. Among her friend group, she was the cheerleader. She was the upbeat one, always. The only medication that she ever describes taking in her memory is an inhaler for her asthma. And since April or May of last year, she is now on 3, count them 3, different psychotropic medications to balance out her mood. And she sincerely believes her sanity is slowly slipping away. And she's not kidding. She really believes that. And I've heard that from a lot of kids. Now, like Tim's story, I can imagine being on your end in your kitchen or in your office thinking, you cherry picked that story too. That seems really extreme as well. But I think we all know there are a lot of Shannons out there, and we need to pay attention to that what's on her mind is on a lot of people's mind. A quick note on the pandemic part. A lot of parents in particular tell me, no, you think my kid's concerned about the pandemic, but he or she doesn't care. If it were up to them, they would just get together with their friends. I bet they get together and take their masks off and they're inside and they're ignoring every safety protocol. There's no doubt that the kids want life to be normal. They want to get together and they're in adolescence. So things feel immediate to them in a way that it might not to us. We might have the impulse control not to do that, but that doesn't mean they don't care. It doesn't mean Shannon isn't worried about her grandparents or her own well-being or her parents or her siblings. It just means she's conflicted, which might be harder if you think about it, you know? So a couple quick thoughts on the pandemic, and then we'll move on and get to some solutions that we can actually put to work. One is that I read some research about 2 years ago that absolutely spooked me and surprised me. And it was, I think, a combination of the New York Times and Princeton doing some research together. In the end, they came up with this thought that anything more than 2 hours a day in front of a screen of any kind, it can be depressing, anxiety provoking, can cause attention issues, and in the extreme can cause suicidal ideation. 2 hours. I'm doing 3 presentations with this group today. I will alone just doing this be on a screen for more than 2 hours. You guys, undoubtedly, every single one of you listening to me will be in front of a screen for more than 2 hours. And any of the kids you work with, by definition, they're in front of a screen for way more than 2 hours. And that's just school and getting work done. Now picture the video games, picture Snapchat, just picture trying to connect with friends online if you can't get together with them in person. So what do we do with that? Really what our kids need is a modicum of grace during the pandemic, right? Because this is their way of connecting. So they're going to be on for more than 2 hours. But I also urge you to press them to take breaks in between things and get some movement and get their mind in a different headspace than just staring at the screen, which we know fundamentally is not good for us. I want you to check in with your kids, the kids that you work with, your own kids at home frequently, because a lot of kids feel they are falling behind academically, socially, they're sad, they're depressed, and they are anxious, and they need people to talk to, and they're ready to talk. Believe me, I am finding in my practice that kids are more open to talking than I ever would have thought they would have been. So take advantage of the moment. And I know you guys are tapped out. You're trying to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again over the course of the past year. So all I want to do is add to your burden. Please tend to the well-being of every single child as well. But I mean it. This is really super, super important and the primary reason that we're here, and allow them to express their feelings, even if their feelings are really, really negative. Before you offer any counterpoints, make sure you acknowledge and express what they have to say. So going back to my story, By mid-March or so of last year, so this book was published in September of 2019, and I spent about 6 months touring, and it was fun and it was great. By mid-March, I had to revisit every single page of this thing and every word of advice I had to see, does this make any sense anymore, or is it defunct? I mean, has pandemic fatigue taken over? And the good news is that all of the advice and all these thoughts still apply, even more so, far more so. And our ears being open and available to our kids couldn't be more important than that is now. So the pandemic fatigue actually emphasizes the point. It doesn't take away from it. But I want to note that things are shifting and changing in our households as we go here. When we started out back in March and April and May, my practice ran a certain way. I was in triage mode. Things were acute and things were urgent, and I was calling DCFS sometimes because families weren't used to being together the way they were. I was calling the police because people were hyper stressed and sometimes issues were emergent. Now, as we linger into our 11th month of the pandemic, this is a chronic condition, right? We're all feeling it, the fatigue and the hopelessness and the depression and the anxiety about, when is this going to end? When are things going to feel normal? And every once in a while, I'm sitting across from a kid via like Zoom, and they'll be like, I can't take it anymore. It's really, really taxing and weighing on me. So we know a few things now that we might not have known then. Our kids aren't moving. They're sedentary. And the shift from inertia to movement, I find to be so difficult. And I'm going to need your help with that. Our kids are listless. They're resigned and a bit hopeless about the situation. We know that they are pretty uninspired and unmotivated. And all these shifts are taking place in our households. And we're feeling the stress as well, right? So all the things that our kids are worried about, we're dealing with too, right? And we're dealing with like their feelings about the losses and the disappointments and the missed opportunities. So we're carrying around a burden too. So about this time when I was putting this talk together in front of my son, he said, well, you've offered people a nice steaming load of good news. Do you have anything positive to say? So let's talk solutions. I think it's time. The first, you probably all remember the adage about the plane that loses oxygen up in the air and the oxygen masks come down. And we all know what we're supposed to do, even though it feels counterintuitive and weird to us that we're going to save ourselves before we save our kids. But in order to be available to ensure that we can save our kids, we put our mask on first. So the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is self-care. So you guys are working hard, inventing the wheel, trying to keep these kids afloat. You are probably overtasked and working way more than you have maybe in any other year of your career. I need you to take care of yourselves. I want you to protect time daily if you can to talk to a colleague, a friend, a spouse, a sibling, a therapist, a coach, clergy, Dr. Larson, somebody who is a kind ear who will listen to your sadness, your frustrations with your family and these kids who are not motivated, and anything else that's on your mind at any given point in time. This is crucial that you be okay and that you get out everything you need to get out so that you are in fine working condition or as close as we can get to that. That's really important. I need you to take frequent breaks from the news and from social media. If you're like me, you know, as soon as we're done here, you're probably going to check Twitter or something else to see what's going on now, you know? And if we can curb that even a little, I think it makes a really big difference. It's important and critical that you, specifically you people listening now, keep hope alive. You've got to remain hopeful. You need to keep thinking as if this is going to end sometime soon. And you have to remind yourselves that sometimes it takes a crisis in order to enact change. In fact, I think it may always take a crisis in order to enact significant change. And we're just in the midst of one of those crises right now. So hope is huge. And I always want you to keep the option of therapy open for yourself. So if you feel like you're not functioning the way you used to, if you feel overly fatigued, if you feel super anxious or depressed or down and just can't shake it, and it's lingering and you know it's different than the way you normally present, absolutely, please do something about that. Reach out to a therapist or a coach and talk to the social worker down the hall and see if they can help you with that, for sure. Nothing is more important in this parenting thing and in being staff that works with kids than your self-care. This is crucial, and it's really urgent right now as we head into this next semester where kids are overtaxed and fatigued and down and anxious. I also want you to attend to the vibe in your home or in your office or wherever the space is where you are working with kids, and really think about whether this is a bit of sanctuary for them, keeping in mind that everything outside of here is probably noisy, and it's noise that they create, or it's noise that's just in their heads, or that's ruminating and going on and on and on for them, negative thinking. And if you can be a reprieve from that by creating space that is calming, and it doesn't have to be perfect, you don't have to have a seance, it doesn't have to be this zen riddled space, but make a space that's comfortable for you, and it'll be comfortable for the kids. Even more importantly, I want you to think for a minute about what your kids are getting from you. Because a lot of us, myself included, we lose track sometimes in the midst of an ongoing crisis. How am I coming across here? Am I coming across the way I want to? Is this useful? Or am I part of the problem? So think about what they're getting from you, and do you light up when you see them? People who choose to be staff in schools and school districts tend to be people who light up for kids, but sometimes we lose our light. So I'm reminding you of that unconditional positive regard that we were all taught to have for kids. Even the kid who is getting on your last nerve on the worst day where you're already frazzled, and he or she is not doing their e-learning, and they're not doing the homework, and they're misbehaving on the worst day, the foundation of your relationship has to remain, we're good. I got you. I've got your back. I have very positive regard for you. I see the good in you. There's a million things we have to change, but fundamentally at the core of it, we're good, and I've got you. I cannot tell you. If my wife were in this room right now, she'd say, do not stop talking about that. Keep that going, because that's the most important thing. Kids have very, very few people that light up for them, fewer now than ever. And that carries so much mileage. I can tell you as a therapist working with a whole lot of kids that they will cite somebody who I've never heard of at the school who just gave them a moment of their time. And it means the world to them. It shifts their entire affect, and sometimes shifts their sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Like, I was worth a moment of this person's time. I must be worthwhile in some way. I cannot underestimate this enough. This is where the emotional bank account comes into play, and unconditional positive regard. And the emotional bank account just says, hey, a lot more positive interactions than negative ones, and things will work out, right? It's true of every relationship we have in our lives, never more true than here. With that in mind, pardon me, this is going back to self-care for just a moment. If you have a significant other, if you're married, you have to tend to those emotional bank accounts too and stay connected. Too many couples that I'm working with are all business these days and all parenting these days. So protect 10 minutes or more a day and just connect with one another. And you need to attend your friendships too. And we don't do a great job of that. There's a real strange phenomenon happening with friendships where the people we're normally really drawn to and we lean on, we're avoiding because we don't know exactly how to navigate our relationships in this climate. And I want you to think about how to do that. And what it usually takes is something beyond just the occasional text or the occasional note. Reach out, spend some time with that person on the weekends or something, but connect, keep your friendships and your relationships fresh. And if it feels awkward, just note that it feels awkward, you know? And if it feels awkward to you, undoubtedly it feels awkward to the person on the other end. You might be wondering, what does this have to do with my job? It's keeping you functioning at somewhere between 85 and 100%, which is crucial and critical. So consider your friendships and don't just write a story about what's on his or her mind. For example, my wife, Julie, is the kindest, sweetest human being on earth. But she asked recently, am I ghosting people? Am I a very good friend right now? Or am I just blowing people off because I'm not sure how to do this? And her radar is usually perfectly calibrated here. But I think all of our radar is off a little bit. So I want us to err on the side of over connecting, over communicating, and making sure that our relationships that matter to us are solid, are good. So check in with your people, all of them, and make sure they're okay and make sure you're okay. I think I have a little bit of time here, so I'm going to keep going for a few minutes. You are going to run into some young people, and this might be true of you yourself, who I haven't spoken about at all yet. I work with some kids who will tell me, you know, this pandemic, this is working out great for me. You know, I don't have to worry about what's coming up this weekend. I got a bully at school that I'm afraid of. I don't have to see that bully very often or at all. I have a lot of school anxiety. I'm going to opt out. I'm not going to go. This is working out great for me. And some of us are feeling that too. I will admit to you that I feel a little bit of that, where it's like, oh, normally we'd be planning like a dinner out this weekend and I'd be burdened by some other thing. And, oh, you know, or we'd be in person and I'd have to fire up for getting on stage in front of a crowd. And this is so much easier. But I don't want us to get acclimated to that. I don't want children in particular to get acclimated to this. So I want us to keep in mind when we're talking to kids who are socially anxious that, hey, we're going to get back to it at some point. So don't get too used to this. And if there's a way to safely keep the practice effect going, I want you to work on that with them. It's really, really important. And work on it for yourself if you feel that kind of relief of, oh, yeah, I don't mind. I think my ideal social setup is global pandemic. Maybe we can hold on to this for a while. It's a dangerous place to be in more ways than one, of course. One additional thought is the boundaries in our relationships are a little messed up as well. So who among us hasn't had the talk with friends about like, can we get together this weekend or not? How much distance do we have to keep? Can we be inside maybe? Can we meet at a restaurant where we sit close to the window? Who hasn't in the last 10, 11 months had that talk with family or friends where it's difficult and it's awkward and we don't always agree? How many of us haven't had that talk in the last 2 weeks? How many of us haven't had to navigate with our kids or somebody else's kids? You know, can they get together? Will they really wear masks? Do they need to be supervised? And when you need to say no, all the negative energy that comes back toward you, the fear of missing out and the anger and the you're the worst parent that ever existed kind of thing, and our broken hearts for our kids who don't get to do the thing that we want them to be able to do under normal circumstances. This drives so much emotional distress, this dynamic of boundaries, that I sometimes will spend an entire therapy hour working on this. And I find that the solution is just really clear communication. For example, if my wife and I are getting together with somebody, we'll say, all right, here's the plan. If we're going to do this, we're going to be bundled up in the yard around the fire pit. Everyone's going to be 8 or 10 feet apart. We're going to be wearing masks the whole time. Is everyone okay with that? And if somebody's not, that's fine. It's okay to say no. And people worry whether that's rude or not. And I'm going to say unequivocally, we need to change our definition of rude. We need to offer each other a little bit of grace for the short run around this topic. It's not incidental and it's not unimportant at all. Briefly, a couple of quick things. I'll make it quick hit so we have a moment. Maybe somebody has a question or two. It might be elemental for me to suggest that you need to be kind to yourself, but we have this tendency, and kids do too, to make upward social comparisons. We compare ourselves to people we think are doing things better than we are. I work with a young woman who recently said to me, and I'm quoting here, "Dr. Duffy, I'm doing the pandemic wrong. I'm not even gaining the benefit of the abundance of time I have available to me now. I'm not working out. I'm not resting, so I feel tired and I'm getting fat." Be gentle and kind with yourself. This is really, really hard. And we need to be gentle and kind with our kids too. A mom I work with brilliantly, when she was fed up, I was on a Zoom call with her a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "You know what? I'm taking the rest of this pandemic pass fail, because trying to get an A or an A minus is just too much. So if things are going good enough, if I'm in the lane and my kids are in the lane, I'm passing." That is being kind to oneself. Now, that is not to say, like one client of mine said, that the pandemic is the longest Thanksgiving weekend ever, and we can drink all we want and eat all we want and sleep all we want and not get anything done. Pay attention to how you are treating your body. We're modeling this for kids all the time too. So just a little note there. A couple other things about kids. There is nothing I can think of that is more likely to keep a child off of my clinical couch across the hall here than movement. And fewer kids are moving with each passing day. And you guys know this, right? You guys know that kids are slouching and sedentary and, barely in the game. So an hour or so of movement a day, and this is hard to get kids to do in a pandemic. So we need to be creative about it. But if they're walking the dog, if they're riding a bike, if they're jogging, if they're doing the Peloton thing or the rowing thing in the basement, I don't care what it is, but a little bit of sweat creates this sanctuary. And instead of fighting the battles around screens and the vapes and the jewels and you're spending too much time with your friends and not on other work, or you're watching video games or playing video games too often, all that stuff falls into the margins for an hour a day. And we're not fighting that fight. And our kids are aligning their mind and their body and their spirit in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. And I think a lot of families are kind of taking a pass on that over the course of the pandemic. That is not the thing to take a pass on. It is the most important thing I think we can do is keep moving. So we might have to do it with our kids. We're going to have to model this to some extent, but keep moving. This last part, I think, is relevant to you, me, parents, everybody. We need to listen really, really well and acknowledge what our kids have to say. It is no surprise that the therapist who is lecturing right now is saying, yeah, we need to listen well. Why do we need to listen well? Because sometimes these children, we know, just need the space, the safe enough space to say the thing, the awful thing about themselves, the worst thing that they normally wouldn't tell anybody. I don't like myself. I don't think other people like me. I blew it. I made a big mistake and I don't think I can fix it. I'm too fat. I'm too stupid. I'm too ugly. I'm not good enough. And we know that teens and tweens feel some of this stuff sometimes. It tends not to linger. If we hold the thing for them, they can usually move on. Okay, I said the thing to my teacher, to the staff, to the social worker, whoever, and they didn't explode. I feel a little safer. I can move on. They've got it. If we don't do that for them, then they're just holding the thing. This is not healthy, right? Because that's a great recipe for anxiety, depression, loneliness, and fear, and hopelessness as well. Or they turn to another child. And, I personally wrote a 150-page dissertation after 5 years of grad school, practicing 25 years. And honest to God, there are still times when I'm on a Zoom call with a troubled teenager and I feel over my skis. I don't want 15-year-olds trying to do this job. It's not fair. It's not safe. I admire the fact that they're willing to do it. I think that's really cool, but it is not their job. So we need to be the ones to hear the thing, absorb the thing, and not try to talk kids out of the thing, right? We don't want to be the people saying, no, 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 that's not true. And you're awesome and you're smart and you're gorgeous and you're beautiful and and you're funny and charismatic and people should love you. And if they don't, that's their problem. If that might feel like the right thing to do, but effectively it's saying I can't handle your thing and I probably won't be able to handle the next thing that you have to bring to me. So we want to be really, really cautious and careful about that. And if I might, I'm going to take advantage of every minute here. Couple quick thoughts on the remainder of the pandemic. We're good? Okay. If you think back to pre-holidays, somewhere around just after Halloween through Christmas, a lot of us felt a reprieve from the negative emotions of the pandemic, right? So a lot of people put my clients, I can see it in their houses. They've got trees up. I can hear the music. I can almost smell the cookies baking. And it's like, November 3rd. So people are trying to find ways to keep the spirits up in their home. I'm working with some clients who are continuing to keep decorations up. I read about one somewhere online today about keeping the tree up for Valentine's Day and just redecorating it. I'm working with one client family who is playing hooky. Dr. Larson, just close your ears for a moment. Playing hooky from e-learning for the day or from in-person learning, hooky from work, and they're having one holiday per month until the pandemic is over. And they're having a great time putting together these holidays. So if there are ways that you can find to keep the spirits up, absolutely take advantage of those ways. And you might realize my kids aren't all on board with that. So definitely leave space for your kids to express their negative emotions and for yourself to express your negative emotions about all the losses and disappointments that have been taking place over the last year, the ones that are still coming down the pike. Do not dismiss those in any way. Be prepared for those down feelings. But you also want to keep hope alive, like I was saying earlier, with yourself, with the kids. So you want to make sure kids know this pandemic, it may change a lot of things, may change some things for the better in the long run, but it will be over at some point. So some of my client families have decided to act as if. So they are going to work and work out and study and play the bassoon and do the Peloton and do all the things as if things are going to get back to normal pretty soon. Now, you may have to move the goalposts down the road to be pretty soon, but if families act as if, I'm finding that actually buoys them quite a bit mood-wise. So you might put that in your toolkit as something to use with some families, because this was not my idea. This was a family's idea, but it works really, really well. And one final note, and I'm kind of reiterating something I said earlier. This is difficult. These months are really, really hard, unprecedented. We have no rule book to follow, not any of us. So be kind and gentle with yourself. Truly take this thing pass fail. Give yourself the grace of doing so, right? And passing means the kids are getting some work done. Chaos is not ensuing. I'm not losing my mind every minute of the day. I'm not losing my cool. That's passing. We're doing fine. You're doing great. And I suspect that if you are listening to my voice right now, you're doing great. Just by virtue of the fact that you are looking for ways to do better suggests you're doing great. We also need to offer the same grace toward the children in our lives, that this is really hard for them. They've never been through this before. Absolutely foreign territory. So the same grace to them. Take care of yourself, take care of your people. And thank you so much for granting me an hour of your time here this afternoon. And Gilda, if there's any thoughts, questions, comments, smart remarks, rebuttals.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much. Pages of notes again. We have 3 questions I'd like to ask you. The first is, and I welcome people. We'd love to know who's here. If you're representing an organization, write that in the Q&A. I can see Dr. Larson's got a question already.
I was going to say, send me a photo of that day that you take off, and I'll celebrate with you. Oh, that's fine.
Dr. Larson, awesome.
Here's the first of the questions. How do we help kids who like staying home? How do we help them to have proactive and positive social skills?
Yeah, this is super, super tricky. One is that these kids tend to disappear, right? They go to their rooms and they close the door. So we forget that part of our social skills take place in our home, interacting with family. So knock on that door, go and sit down and hang out with your child. If they're watching a movie, playing a video game, listening to music, even if it's not your cup of tea, sit down with them for a while, interact with them for a while, and give them that practice to do that. Encourage them to reach out in safe ways to some of their friends and some of their peers and have some form of interaction. Do not allow them to let months go by without interacting with other people their age, other people your age, their grandparents, extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins. Be creative about this, but every day, make sure your child is interacting with someone. It's a great question because I did work with a family about a week or 2 ago, and the parents kind of were resigned that their son, who was 15 at the time, was just going to not talk to anybody for the next several months. And we really had to work through that was not going to be okay. He was not going to be able to snap his fingers on the back end of it. And there isn't going to be just this day where everyone says like, okay, pandemic's over, take the masks off, everyone go back to school, everything's fine. I'm not sure exactly what this is going to look like, but we do want our kids to continue to interact every single day with somebody. And we want it to be safe, and we want it to be monitored, especially if we're worried. But do not relent. And if your child tells you they like this better, acknowledge that, allow some time for them to be alone like you normally would, but also tell them, you know what, as your mom, as your dad, as your teacher, as your social worker, I need you to be talking to people sometimes. It's really, really important. It's probably the most important life skill you'll ever have.
Very good, very good. Talk a little bit about insomnia. How do we help kids with insomnia now?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I can tell it comes from an informed point of view. I'm working with more kids who are having sleep problems than ever before. Way too many of them are turning, and the parents too, we're turning quickly to medications, right? Have a little bit of Ambien or Lunesta from the medicine cabinet, or, even melatonin or something over the counter. Still, we're sending the message that you need help getting to sleep. Typically, if a child is experiencing insomnia, it has to do with something that is on his or her mind. The beauty is that even our teenagers tend to be a little regressive late at night. I worked a couple of years ago with a 17-year-old boy who was a football player, lacrosse player, toughest guy ever. But when he went to bed, he wanted to talk to one of his parents, who would sit on the side of his bed for a while. Don't assume that your child is past this. Go and sit down with them, especially in the evening when things are a little gentler with them, and talk to them about what's on their mind. Don't say, why can't you sleep? Because they might not be able to answer that question, but just talk to them about, you might want to mention and start with, this pandemic, this time has been really hard on me. And sometimes I feel like I am really anxious, I'm really nervous, I feel differently than I used to, and sometimes I can't sleep, if that's true. Is that true of you? You've mentioned you can't sleep. So what's on your mind? What are you thinking about when you fall asleep? And is there another thought that we might want to put in there right before you fall asleep? And maybe we can download one of these meditation apps like Calm or Headspace, and you can kind of just get into this calm, centered space and make that a practice for yourself. Um, the other thing I'm finding works surprisingly well, Gilda, is I'm getting kids to do two things that I do, and it took me a while to get around to doing this. When I learned about the 2 hours of screen time being problematic, anything more than that, my phone never comes into my bedroom. And I'm encouraging kids, hey, do me this favor, try this for a week. No phones in the bedroom, and just we'll pick a book and we'll have a book club. And you got to read that at night, and you will eventually fall asleep. And when I get kids to take me up on that, that works really, really well. So part of the reason kids have insomnia is this is super stimulating. So they've got stuff on their mind. You add this to it, and you've got a couple hours, and it's silent. So you don't necessarily know what's going on. So if you can get the phone out of the room, which is hard to do, and you'll probably have to do it yourself in order to make it happen. That's what happened with my son. And if you can get them reading or doing a headspace or a calm meditation, then that insomnia should go away without resorting to a pill.
Next question. How do I get my parent or therapist? How do I help this child open up? Everything's fine when I ask. And this question is from a parent, but I'm sure useful for anyone who's a school staff as well.
Absolutely. Oh, for sure. And for therapists, by the way. So the idea behind this here is to play the long game. So there's a couple things we do. Is we expect that we need an answer right away, and if we don't get that, we're parenting wrong or we're doing our job incorrectly, right? What we're really doing initially is saying, hey, if you ever need to talk to anybody about anything, I'm available for that. That's the only message you need to get across. And your kids may or may not take you up on that, but if they know you're available, there's a lot of mileage to that, knowing like there is an adult at the ready and I can turn to them with the thing I have on my mind anytime. And so reiterate that message. You can reiterate that message every day, and you can bring some levity to that. You can say, I know you heard this from me yesterday, but if there's ever anything on your mind, you can feel free to talk to me about that just about any time, and they'll roll their eyes. But you might also get the moment where they text you or they say, hey, can I have a minute? And when they say it, absolutely drop everything, protect that minute, and sit down with them and without judgment, just listen to what they have to say. But be willing to play a long game here. Do not judge yourself based on the first, second, third, or 10th interaction with the child, because, I will tell you that I get typically a protected hour a week with a child. And I have had to wait months for a child to open up to me even a little bit. So if you are willing to just show that positive regard and sit with them, that does a lot in and of itself without the words. And eventually the words will come. Just be present and available. If you are carrying, though, your own fear, your own judgment, your own ego to that process, it's not going to happen. So you've got to keep that stuff in check.
Thank you. I'm so enjoying the organizations that are listing who they are on the Q&A. That's really, really lovely to see. One last question, because you have to rest up for 7 o'clock this afternoon. But the social media and anxiety, it's such an issue and so many questions on that.
Yeah. Part of the reason I brought up movement is I have worked with some athletes over the years, and I always love that. And what I learned from athletes early on is whatever that practice or that game or that meet or whatever is, that sanctuary away from social media. They're just not looking at it. And then I realized, oh, the bassoon player also is not looking at social media, and the actor also is not looking at social media. So if kids are involved, the guy who's loading juice in the produce section of the grocery store is not looking at social media. So the more we have our kids engaged and involved in other things in their lives, and I know this is tricky, we're in a pandemic, and a lot of parents want to give themselves a break. And I'm willing to say, yes, absolutely. Social media is the way that most every kid connects with their friends. So you don't want to disallow it altogether. That's not going to work. But you do want to limit the time that your children spend on there. And kids are going to tell you, but I'm bored and I'm not connecting with my friends, and they'll have excuses. But we forget, because our kids are so rarely bored, that boredom is not the end of the world. Thinking about like a different thing to do, right? Is not the end of the world. It's okay for your child to get creative about how to fill his or her own time. And part of taking social media and saying, okay, we're just going to have an hour and a half of that a day. Your child then has to be alone with his or her own thoughts for at least a while. And this isn't something I've talked about, but it is such a crucial concept. Think about how rarely kids are alone with their thoughts. Picture a day in your life when you were 15 or 16 years old. You were alone with your thoughts most of the time, right? We might have had a Walkman, but most of the time we were just alone with our thoughts. Now, kids hardly ever hear themselves think. So when I talk about noise versus sanctuary, there is noise in our kids' heads virtually all the time. So if we can create a little space during the day where that is not happening, that is really, really important. And the counterpoint is social media is also really, really important to kids now. It is a way in which they connect with one another. So if you have a child who is developmentally at a place where they can manage social media safely, I encourage you to allow some of it, because they do connect via social media. Kids no longer text. They will write each other via Snapchat, or they'll send something funny to one another, a little video. And some of the TikTok things are really fun and funny. Some of them are awful, of course, and that's true for any social media. And we want to regulate it to some extent. By the way, just as a side note, the best regulators, by the way, I find are aunts and uncles. So when kids are new to social media, I always say, if mom and dad can't be your friends or your followers, aunts and uncles get to be. And I was that uncle. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal, because there has been more than one time when I wrote either my niece or my nephew and said, you've got 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'm calling mom and dad. And boy, were those posts down quick. So they got the safety element of that too.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. As I'm seeing all of the people that came on this call, it's reminding me to mention that we're doing this again. We have a program on March 3rd for staff. We have one on May 5th, and we may add another one in April on mindfulness. So be sure you're going to the website, glenbardgps.org, for those updates. Dr. Larson, if you haven't run away to another meeting, if there's anything you want to say, now's a great time.
I just really appreciate the presentation. Wow, how timely. And especially after 2 days of lousy snow, right? I mean, we have a lot of things that are really pressing and influencing us, and this conversation is so timely. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Larson.
Thank you. Great to have you here. Everybody come on back at 7 o'clock and spread the word. Thank you so much, everyone.
All
Have a
right.
good.
Take care.
Bye-bye.